Chapter 2. Hermann Boerhaave as a symbol of clinical eclecticism. That I dedicate this chapter to Hermann Boerhaave is because I have received my medical training in Leiden, Holland, where the medical school is still permeated with the spirit of the great 17th century teacher. In the 2000 years between Hippocrates and Boerhaave, the science of medicine developed in various directions. Clinical experiences widened, the therapeutic technique improved, but the greater change was from a primary deductive and philosophical approach to the inductive and empirical. Experience and observation increasingly took the place of theory over the centuries. During the Middle Ages, medical research was necessarily limited by the theological constraint of the day and was largely carried out by the alchemists with their studies of the curative properties of various elements. The biological ideas of Aristotle were extended and scientifically altered, while the anatomical system of Galen was accepted in its totality, but all theories remained within the confines of theomistic philosophy. The Middle Ages were a period of immense intellectual activity, but it was also a period of not able to break its bounds and explore beyond the horizon of its world. Man's curiosity was limited by theology. A change came, however, with the advent of the Paracelsus, a Swiss alchemist and a physician born in 1493. The eye of man, which had, in the main, been turned inward, now turned outward and examined nature. Paracelsus taught that the whole natural world was fit to be studied by man, that everything in it could be measured, classified and fitted into a general pattern. Paracelsus himself was a wanderer between the medieval and the modern world. He fought against the scholastic trend of his day, made use of the popular medicine and folklore. He believed that man is a microcosm, mystically connected to the microcosm. According to him, the cosmic influences express the philosophical and the astrological laws are mirrored in the human body, and the vital energy and the archeus controls all the processes. The archeus, which we may compare with the modern concept of wholeness, derived from the roots heal and healing, holds the body together and protects it against detrimental interference. Disease, though it is related to certain causal complexities, the entia mobi is predominantly suffering with the archeus and the archeus which mastery all powers of recovery. With the first triumphs of pure mechanical science, the concept of astrophysics and hydrochemistry arose, according to which life became easily measurable combination of mechanical and chemical activities. The possibilities of curing disease now seemed at last within the grasp of man. It was to be like repairing a machine. Boerhaave shared the same amazement about the universe that Paracelsus had. He was acquainted not only with the old theories of Hippocrates but also with the discoveries of Galileo, Bacon, and Boyle. His fame, however, rests largely on his being primarily a clinical physician. Boerhaave was born physician. He brought to his work great forces of personality, single-mindedness, and determination, and to this he added the encyclopedic knowledge. He taught that diseases must be studied where it actually exists, at the bed of the sick person. If you wish to find out about a disease, he said, it is to the patient that you must go for information. It was this doctrine that Boerhaave taught, and enormous audiences attended his lectures. He was the epitome of no rigid medical theory, correcting the truth from whatever school of medicine it might be found. He was most in sympathy with the intro-physician, not so much on account of their conceptions, but because of the straightforward method which they used to express their ideas. Boerhaave was a clinical eclectic, propounded on explanation of the ultimate causes of disease. Disease for him was disturbance of function, and its definition was sufficient for him. He believed that the phenomena of life was medical, stating, when the juices stand still, there is no life. If they flow uninterrupted through the duct, the body is alive. When we look at the corpse, we may see that all the solid parts such as are necessary for health and liquid parts are present. Only the movement which circulates the juices is not there. As soon as the nerves are excited in one way or another, so as to make the substance which keeps the heart in the motion flow again. Then sad pictures of death disappear, and joyful life come back. Not only life, but also warmth, color, movement, consciousness, every vital natural human activity. Nothing is added to or subtracted from the body except movement, yet life, which had been lost, comes back. Boerhaave discriminates between disease of the solid parts, which include organic deformities, and deviation in the number, size, place, stiffness or softness of the tissue, or narrowing of the vessels. Defects in the body can be either quantitative or qualitative when changes in content occur, bringing about a condition of acrinomia, which may be sour, salt, bitter, aromatic, fatty, or alkaline. Here, Boerhaave shows himself also to be an adherent of the ancient dyscrasia theory. Both kinds of illnesses can occur simultaneously. It causes obstruction of the ducts and the vessels of the inflammation. In cases of obstruction of the ducts and vessels or of inflammation, there are defects both of form and content. There is an accumulation of blood as a result of contraction of the small blood vessels, which is followed by changed composition of the body. Fever is a result of increased action in the heart and augmented resistance in the capillary vessels. This also, Boerhaave lays more emphasis in the phenomena of increased pulsation than on that of the elevated temperature, although he used a thermometer as an instrument of execute. Thus, to sum up, Boerhaave considered the human body as a consisting of solid parts which contain vessels for conducting alteration. Thus, to sum up, Boerhaave considered the human body as a consisting of solid parts which contain vessels of conducting alteration, separation, union and secretion of liquids, and of moving parts which, because of their form, hardness and cohesion, affect the movements of the vessels. If the free circulation of liquids in the vessels is the cause of life, the primal cause of this life movement must be looked for, not in liquids themselves. Internal circulation will probably be found to be due to stimulus of fermenting agents. This ferment was a hypothetical substance remarked on by the chemists of those days. Boerhaave was also a great natural psychologist. This goodness of heart, his love of people, and his understanding of character was such that he had great power over people and thus could easily impose his will. This moral superiority was the strength behind his medical skills. This was deeply concerned with the condition of the soul, and he was well aware of the connection between healthy soul and healthy body. In this extant speech of the medical faculty of the University of Leiden, he said, quote, "The powerful influence of the soul on the body recognize that there is no non-mechanical side to all life, whether in sickness or in death. In vain do we probe, in vain do we speculate on the power of mechanical forces. Who has ever been able to discover in any of the primitive elements of the body or soul the secret of his marvelous unity between body and soul?" End of quote. It is apparent that Boerhaave was a philosopher as well as a physician, and, indeed, he devoted 3 years to the study of philosophy. As a student attending lectures in dialectics, metaphysics, and physics, he gave proof of his talents both in his doctoral thesis and in his official speech on the highest good, which he received the gold medal of honor. He believed that though the physician must practice objective and accurate examination, medicine should be free from over-systemization. The physician, he said, has observed the phenomena of the living body with his senses and has thought them over with his mind, but they are phenomena which are only to be explained by the laws which work in inanimate nature. Boerhaave's preaching of eclecticism is a useful platform from which we study the great variety of later theories about quiescence of disease and the concept of illness. Boerhaave's preaching of eclecticism is a useful platform from which to study the great variety of later theories about the quiescences of disease and the concept of illness. However, let it first be remarked that the tendencies of some students to use preconsciously an eclectic attitude in taking from every school a little bit of spice also carries its own danger. A later chapter in this book, that on epistemology, will try to correct the naivety of eclecticism and to differentiate and integrate the thoughts of different schools. Epistemology may be looked upon as bringing integration to eclecticism. Chapter 3. Some historical concepts of disease. The doctor of today is not without conceptual ideas about disease. In the past, the relationship between medical science and philosophy has been of rather negative nature. But in the last decade, science has explored viewpoints and horizons that have brought into the closer contact with its fellow discipline. The course of development of conceptual definition usually follows this pattern. First, the scientist starts in a speculative way to bring the problem into a desired system of philosophy without being aware of using a priori method of reasoning. Next, a corrective reaction sets in and he attempts to restrict himself to observation, in the instance of the physician, to either the search for the origin of symptoms or to their most competent typography. This usually follows a reflection on existence and outcome of the symptoms and on the limits of investigation. The cautious man of the science contents himself with rendering a tentative opinion, while leaving ample room for different conceptions. To the category of speculative conceptions belong the mythological conception discussed in chapter for Hippocrates. The theory of speculative conception belongs to the mythological conception discussed in the chapter of Hippocrates. Such speculation reaches rashly for an explanation. Such speculation reaches rashly for an explanation while the experience is still insufficient. An example of such a line of thought is that of the Skolmin, a brilliant member of the early German pathological school of the 19th century. Skolin was influenced by the idealistic philosophy of Schelling. He sees life as a struggle between the egoistic and the universal principle of life. Man, as part of his universal battle, seeks to break away. The universe, however, tries to subordinate the parts to the whole. Thus, a polar tension develops in the individual. This egoistic self is a battle with universal forces. Death is the final triumph of the universal principle, through which the parts are absorbed by the whole. Disease is the struggle. Health is the right balance between ego and universe. Disease as an ontological principle. From the existence of disease as a fundamental entity, one, according to the oncologist, understands its essence. Disease is looked upon as something independent, something automatic, and something that stands alongside life. Disease is a ding, an ink which penetrates life. Philosophical image. An ink which penetrates life, a philosophical image. Heinemann puts this on the same level with the Neumann of Kant, an enigma of transcending experience. Yet, disease as such is at the same time looked upon as something unknowable which shows itself in symptoms but does not betray its essence. In the opposite sense, symptoms of disease were often given the significance of being the essence of the disease. In the pan-bacteriological phase of medicine, the idea of an absolute contrast existing between physiological and pathological symbiosis of man and microorganism was accepted. Even now, many physicians consider microorganisms to the essence of infection diseases without taking into account the riddle of faltering resistance to inaction, faltering resistance to infection, static and dynamic theories. The two contrasting approaches of contemplation and observation have never been clearly labeled as opposite. The morphologist, the pathologist, the anatomist try to describe essential of the static pathological processes. The abnormalities, the changed organs visible to the eye and under the microscope, are what is perceived. Thus, what is mere symptom as changed quality and quantity is outwardly credited with either essence. Thus, what is mere symptom and changed quantity and quality is outwardly credited with being the essence. This was especially true of cellular pathology in the 19th century. Disease is the diseased cell, as Vico says, est being kien. Thus, what is mere symptom and changed quantity and quality is outwittingly credited with being the essence. This was essentially true of the cellular pathology in the 19th century. Disease is a diseased cell. The psychologist, on the other hand, seeks the essence of the disease in the morbid dynamics and in the alteration of function. But both groups of researchers see the essence of disease in the symptoms of disease. The periphery of symptoms is observed, and a system of these symptoms is built. The nomenclature does not represent an idea, but one of the signs. One may think, for instance, of the old name sugar illness for diabetes and of the diagnosis of the anemia. The disease is considered to be the equal abnormal function of the organ. Disease is considered to be the equal of the abnormal function of the organism. Disease is defined as the total of the functional disturbance. Disease is defined as the total of the functional disturbance. Critical philosophical contemplation. Neither exclusive objective ascertainment of facts nor mere speculative theory has been able to satisfy the research workers. Neither exclusive objective ascertainment of facts nor mere speculative theory has been able to satisfy the research workers. For that reason, the present-day pathologist does not like the attempt an overall definition of disease. The teacher in the general pathology mentions various concepts which have become common but does not usually touch upon the deeper problems. Even though disease and life are one, the teacher in general pathology mentions various concepts which have become common but does not usually touch upon the deeper problems, even though disease and life are one. The pathologist's advice is to look only on the palpable things, and this is indeed sensible working program, but one must also remain aware of its limitation. The textbooks of general pathology I used to study when I was a medical student usually referred the culture question of disease to the mysterious problem of life and death. Kelb, for instance, said in the textbooks on pathology and psychology, "Disease is life under changed conditions. There is no illness. There are only sick people. In principle, nothing biological different happens to sick people than to healthy ones." End of quote. Another textbook termed disease as abnormal condition of the body and life. Another textbook termed disease an abnormal condition of the body and life, omitting the intricate meaning of the word abnormal. In this textbook on special pathological anatomy, Ribert stated that, quote, "Disease concerns the entire human body." End of quote. Let he elaborate that what is known as disease is a combination of various disturbances resulting from the reduced capacity of part of the tissue to react adequately. Usually, he stated, this is a result of abnormalities in structure, which secondarily can be the results of invading pathogenic external factors. Aschoff, as I understand him, distinguished between disorder as a successful reaction for noxious stimuli and disease as an unsuccessful reaction with life. Aschoff, as I understand him, distinguished between disorder as a successful reaction to a noxious stimulus and disease as an unsuccessful reaction interfering with life. Disease, he remarked, is a result of succession of disorder leading to unsuccessful reactions of the organism or parts thereof. In his careful descriptions, Aschoff convinced of disease not in an original entity, convinced of disease not as original entity per se, but as the evidence resulting from continued disturbance of the normal adaptation and reactions of life. The damage of life becomes apparent in the abnormal function. Any damage which cannot be avoided can become a danger to the continuity of life. The problem of danger to life and also the cause of illness are dependent on the localization and the extensiveness of the damage. But in all this sound reasoning, unwittingly a value judgment creep in. Disease is a value judgment. According to Hexheimer, no definition of concept of disease will be complete without mentioning the danger it presents to the continuity of life. Jasper remarked justly that disease is usually a subjective judgment of something harmful, undesirable, inferior. Disease is thus a judgment of value. Consequently, in the beginning of this century, disease was already looked at as a condition of an organism at the limit of its adaptability. A living person becomes more ill as his adaptability decreases. Here, we are coming face to face with the forerunners of some of the actual ideas of sale, which will not be included in this historical survey, but served for the later chapter. In the Romantic period of medicine in the beginning of the 19th century, the concept of the purpose of being ill was brought up more or less speculatively. According to Scholin, disease was an inner confusion of the concept of life. The concept of life contained, according to him, at the same time, the concept of health. A mass epidemic agent causing disease and called by him genus epidemicus would bring forth the necessity stimuli to growth and change of mankind, through which healthy life could assert itself. We find here merely the forerunner of Darwin's idea that disease could be the natural selecting force for what is healthy and strong. How can we look at the process of disease? Is it only the symptoms that make us recognize them? Indeed, we look continually for signs and symptoms and speak of morbid phenomena, though we usually have no option of the deeper process. Do symptoms perhaps tell us the opposite, namely, how healthy the organism is? Do so-called pathological manifestations perhaps tell us how strongly and how defensively the organism is reacting to something noxious and injurious? Perhaps we would discover no pathological anatomical abnormalities in the person who succumbs too rapidly to disease. March, the pathologist from Hamburg, in the beginning of his century, repeatedly pointed out that there are groups of diseases which must be regarded quite differently. In connection with the development of immunity, he divided diseases into those which elicit argumentative self-defenses and those in which the defenses has disappeared. Thus, plus ailments and minus ailments. In one group arises immunity. The symptoms of disease are the signs of the organized defenses of the organism. In the other group, the defenses forces fail and the symptoms of disease are the signs of slow surrender. This grouping is similar to the usual division into acute and chronic diseases. Therapy for the first group should possibly be done. For the second, it should endeavor to increase the acute mobilization of disease. Such had varied personal opinion of the disease. Disease, after all, is nothing but a response of a stimulus. The stimulus in itself is not important, but the receiver of the stimulus is. Disease, according to this theory, is merely a certain stage in the interaction between life and its surrounding influences. Every stimuli could act to disturb the balance. The tolerance capacity and durability of the balance was looked as the foremost problems. In this theory, the mystery of inherited tolerance capacity has not yet been eradicated. The eclectic conclusion. The various concepts of disease have certain generalities in common. Almost always one perceives the hesitation with which the scientist states his opinion, the careful clinician deferring to leave the problem unanswered rather than give an extra definition. One may see disease as a many-sided unity, a unitas multiplexer, a consultation of various factors, a constellation which one partly knows, though a great deal belongs to the unknown. Another merely gives this formulation built on the dyadic consideration of as possible working hypothesis. The present-day approach to definition is eclectic, skeptical, hesitant, and multiform. Classification of disease. The number of possible clinical and nosological pictures of disease is unlimited. Refined diagnostic techniques are mechanically augmented eye. The chemical laboratory, the psychological tests are uncovering an increasing number of varieties. Nature does not classify disease like a pathology textbook, and therefore each illness has to be considered individually. Hahnemann, early in the 19th century, the founder of homeopathy, brought the unique of individuality for the patient to the fore. He even went as far as to say that every medical case is unique in itself, as every human being has its own private susceptibility and historical circumstances. Later, we should call diseases and historical accidents and biographical crises of the short road between life and death. According to Heyman, every classification of disease is a limitation to the art of healing. The clinical concept of cause. Although the physician looks for the cause of the disease, in biology it is not clearly defined what may be regarded as cause. According to physics, cause and effect must be proportional to each other. A certain potential energy must be present for a certain activity, no matter what the agent is that puts that energy into action. What then must we call cause in disease? The energy change or the unknown directing agents of the life force? Or is the original cause of the disease always enclosed in the patient's disposition and constitution? Can what is not already there ever come to be for? Is it the inherited store of information of the race enclosed in genes that make man weak or strong? An external stimuli usually serves as a trigger, yet in everyday speech, these external forces are called the origination of diseases. Indeed, one sometimes calls this disturbance of the functional balance the cause. For a long time, invading bacteria were brought as being the cause of the contagious disease, until it was discovered that harmless symbiosis was also possible with the same pathogenic microbe. After this, the riddle of the pathogenicity of microbes and the susceptibility of man had to be solved. Physicians sometimes merely notice the resulting changes in the organism, while the initial cause already lies far behind. The so-called prima causa mobi can never be the starting point for a therapy, as in most cases this primal cause will never be known. Psychoanalytic medicine was in the beginning too much oriented to this principle of primal cause. When the disease exists as a functional imbalance, the primal cause has often done its work and disappeared. The unbiased examiner initially perceives disease by the noticeable changes in the body and psyche, the signs of disease, the symptoms. Gradually, the physician, the physical, chemical, and psychological means he learns to detect the hidden signs and triggers of the disease, exogen and endogen. In the theory of disease, we have to consider whether the organism was born in sound condition and whether only the harmful outside intrusion influenced the organism, whether a primary susceptibility and inferiority were present, or whether the exogenous trauma tripled the scale. These problems are connected with the metaphysical question, whether life, individual life, is merely a product of circumstances or assertive hereditary endowed. Endo or oxygen means belonging or not belonging to the individual body. In psychopathology, this differentiation is used in a more imprecise and rather confusing way. For instance, the exogenous reaction type is a person who reacts with a specific innate psychopathological reaction form of a noxious invasion from outside, e.g., alcohol or bacteria. One usually reduces this problem of endogen versus exogen to contrasting the constitution as some of the innate and the inherited qualities of responses to all influences the individual undergoes from factors outside the constitution, nature versus nurture. The importance of organ inferiority. Under the founder of the individual psychological trend in the psychoanalysis regards man continuous primarily in result of forces working on the inherited core and sees the organism as principally formed and molded by exogenous forces which act upon the ever-regenerating innate primary potentiality. As early as during the fetal life, detrimental influences can have acted upon awakening life. Therefore, the individual can be born with partially inferior organs which can, however, later compensate for their minus function and can even attain increased achievement. However, this overcompensated function remain rocae minorisis resistii, which a minimum of strength, with a minimum strength in reserve. According to Andler, those organs that are in the earliest period of phylogenesis underwent anatomical or functional changes tend more to verification and disease of varying entomology. Many of these changed organs are connected with man's elect gait. If a certain organ lags behind in function, the other part of the organism attempts to compensate for the defect. An individual's constitution, he believes, is connected with susceptibility of disease in a certain direction. Andler's story is an acceptable way of explaining differences of constitution resulting from detrimental influences during phylogenesis and autogenesis. In the process of historical adaptation of the phylogenetically younger organs, we react differently, with less capacity for regeneration and renewed adaptation. Then, the phylogenetically older ones. This theory explains in essence the constitutional variation of the individual. Modern research on embryonal development can often point out at which time in autogeny the individual was struck by the detriment influence so that the malformation resulted. Constitution as fate. Others view constitution and disease as man's fate, unshakable and unchangeable. By human intervention, constitution may be defined as which is essential to life, the indispensable potential element without which no life is possible. We can distinguish between two groups of constitutional qualities. 1. General qualities which belong to all elements of the living organism, and 2. Constitutional qualities of specific organs that are indispensable to life. The risk person differs from the healthy individual through a disturbance in certain action. The sick person differs from the healthy individual through disturbance in certain actions. Thus, we can define disease as a disturbance to certain degree of the constitutional function an organ, e.g., that of the heart, the central nervous systems, lungs, kidneys, pancreas, etc., as long as the disturbed function is compensated for and adjusted to in one way or another. It does not hinder the owner. Should the disturbance exceed a certain degree, however, the adaptation falls short and disease arises. Thus, to say it in a short paragraph, disease arises when what is necessary is lacking. The mystery of life force and its regenerative quality, is one more introduced into the concept of constitution. Finally, the problem of disease is reduced to the disturbance of certain degrees of function that is necessary for life. Popal, a psychiatrist struggling with the concept of disease, defines this indispensability of certain function and dangers to life more elaborately. We call disease a change in vital events, which would have been caused by either an innate disturbance of the external stimuli, which both mean a danger to the total person. This conflagration may lead either to complete recovery or to recovery with defect or to death. Thus, to arrive at a rather concise definition, disease implies moral danger. Danger, indeed, hidden thoughts of danger and death are implied in our use of the words functional disturbance and disease.